Hello everyone and welcome back to another book review. First of all, if you are new here, if this is the first video you're watching from me, I post a new book review almost every single day. So if you're looking for some reading inspiration, if you're looking for some ideas of what to read next, if you just like following book reviews, then maybe feel free to stick around. Now let's talk about today's book. Today I'm going to be reviewing volume 11 in the series that I am rereading, and that is No Matter How I Look at It, It's You Guys' Fault I'm Not Popular. This is by Nico Tanigawa. So just for a heads up, I have read this series before. I read it partially. I read it through volume 15 back in 2021, but I stopped and now I am rereading the series. So I do have a little bit of an idea where the next couple volumes in the series are going, so that may slightly influence my review. So this is a review of volume 11, so I'm going to assume that you either know what happened in volumes 1 through 10, or you don't care if I spoil it. If you do need a refresher on what happened through volumes 1 through 10, I do have reviews of all those volumes on my channel, so you can go check them out. But basically this series has been following the adventures of a high school girl named Tomoko. Tomoko is this girl right here on the cover. She thought she was going to do great in high school when she came in. She played a lot of video games where she was a high school girl, and she was like, I'm going to get the boyfriend, I'm going to have a bunch of friends, and I'm going to have a really fun time. However, Tomoko's experience didn't go quite like that. Tomoko has struggled with being lonely, with some social isolation, with social anxiety, with a little bit of depression. Basically, she's kind of been outcast from her group for a while, and she continues to do things too that kind of keep her outcast. She puts her foot in her mouth a lot. She sometimes isn't the nicest person. She does things that are kind of embarrassing. So Tomoko has had a lot to work on, and she also has been incredibly lonely for a part of this series. I definitely understand when reading the series, people drop out around 4 or 5 volumes in, because at the very beginning of the series, Tomoko is not in a good place. She's really in kind of a dark place where she's incredibly lonely. She doesn't have anyone to talk to. And especially when you're a teen, which is the age that Tomoko is supposed to be, she's in high school, you desperately want to fit in, probably more than I feel like any other time in your life. When you become an adult, you get a little bit more confidence that maybe not everyone has to like you, or you may not care a whole lot or as much about what other people think about you. But still, overall, even as adults, all humans crave connections. And I feel like especially as a teen, you really want to fit in, and you still have that natural human need for connection to other people. And Tomoko has been missing both of those for a long time. This series is definitely what I would consider a slow burn, but not necessarily like a romance slow burn. Now, if romance does get mixed up in the series at any point, I would not be opposed, but this so far has not been a romantic sort of manga. There's no romance in this manga. The slow burn has been more about Tomoko's personal growth and development. So there's this cliche that I feel like I've seen on the internet, and it's probably been beaten to death at this point, and it's like, growth isn't linear, or maybe it's healing isn't linear, which probably has been overdone at this point, but the reason it's said is because it's true. No one wakes up, realizes that they have a negative coping mechanism, decides to fix it, and then never does that negative coping mechanism again. And Tomoko has a lot of negative coping mechanisms. It's painful to be lonely, it's painful to be a social outcast, it's painful to be embarrassed. And so she's developed this mechanism of just putting up these walls, pretending like she doesn't care that no one talks to her, pretending that she's better than everyone else, hating on other girls for basically having the things that she wants, hating on girls who have boyfriends, hating on girls who have cute outfits, hating on girls who are hanging out in groups. Even in her internal monologue, she's saying that these girls are dumb, that she doesn't want to be like them, like thank goodness she's not like them, but secretly deep inside, this is all a coping mechanism to try to convince herself that she doesn't want this thing that she wants really bad. Volume 11, I would describe as the volume where Tomoko realizes she doesn't want to go back. There was a moment, so Tomoko had been perpetuating a cycle up to this point where she would see something she wanted, or she had this opportunity where she could connect with her classmates. She did something dumb. She put her foot in her mouth. She said something. She put up her defense mechanism of like, I'm lonely, so I'm going to pretend to hate this. So either, yeah, she either did something embarrassing, or she's just pretended like she hated this thing because she was hurting from being lonely, so let's just put up our walls, and then the cycle would repeat. She wound up going on a class trip in, I don't know at this point, volume 7 or 8, and that kind of just interrupted the cycle that she was going through, and now Tomoko since then has been building these little tiny connections. It's like a snowball. If you start a snowball at the very top of a mountain, like in a little ball, I don't know if the physics work on this, and you push it down, it'll accumulate snow. This was probably not how it actually works in real life, but it'll get bigger. We can pretend in this metaphorical universe that's what happens. Just the tiny interactions that she built, probably around the class trip, but there were little moments before then that I referenced. I think in volume, at some point they mentioned her entrance exams. I don't know if that's me remembering something from a volume from my read in 2021 or not, but basically she's been building these little tiny connections that she can build on, and she's also growing as a person. And this is what I mean when I say this is a slow burn. Tomoko's growth is slow, and sometimes she backtracks. Sometimes she goes back to being her mean self. She definitely relies on those coping mechanisms a lot still, and she definitely isn't a perfect person by any exaggeration, but she's growing. And I feel like we're seeing more and more of this growth in every single volume. Volume 11 at the very beginning, and this is what I mean when I say Tomoko realizes she doesn't want to go back. At the beginning of this volume, she is going to eat lunch with someone, but then someone's out of school because they're sick, and then someone else makes plans to eat lunch with someone else, and basically at the end of the day, she has to eat lunch by herself. Now, for like the first like 8 volumes or so, she ate lunch by herself every single day, and she was pretending like it was fine, she didn't care, and she tries to go back to her normal routine because in like the last volume particularly, she kind of got in with some people that she had some connections, and even though she may not have been close, and even though she was still kind of relying on her defense mechanisms, she started to eat with them, she started to sit with them, she started to build these little connections with people. And in volume 11, when she's eating by herself, she tries to do the same thing she was doing back then. She's like, I'm gonna look at websites on my phone, I'm just gonna eat my food, it's gonna be fine. But she suddenly realizes that she doesn't want to go back to the way it was. Having these connections with other people is what she wants, and she suddenly is open with herself for almost the first time, and it's like, I want this. And we can see the walls coming down. We can see the walls that Tomoko has built around herself as like a defense mechanism start to crumble like before our eyes. It's that snowball effect. We've picked up enough momentum, enough connections that now Tomoko doesn't want to pretend like she doesn't want to be friends with anyone. She's willing to admit to herself. And I feel like this is a huge growth moment. There's a part on page 119, if you would like to follow along in your own volume. There was a day where there was a lot of snow. They didn't cancel school right away, so some people came in, but a lot of students couldn't make it, so she wound up just hanging out with her friends. I don't know if you had this happen. There were a couple days when I was in school growing up where it wouldn't be a snow day, but the roads would be pretty bad and some people couldn't make it in, or the buses wouldn't run for certain areas, or whatever the situation was. So you'd have like a very small class, and it wasn't really like normal lessons because you couldn't have lessons without that many people there. This is basically what happens. There's a bad snowstorm. Tomoko still walks into school along with people who can make it, but it's just a small group, so they're just like supposed to be hanging out. I think they like paint nails. It's just the people there just hanging out, and it's again those connections that Tomoko really wants and needs to build, and she's building them. She goes on this snow day, and they wind up canceling the school day like partway through, like 3 hours in, so she gets sent home. And when she's going home, she tells her mom, like, classes were canceled for the day, and her mom's like, well, you didn't have to walk in then, like, that was kind of a waste of time for you to, like, walk to school for a couple hours. But she says, in, like, her mind, she's like, I wish I hadn't gone, but I can't say that initially she's like, her first reaction would usually be like, I wish I hadn't gone, but that's not what she's thinking. It's on this page, in page 119, if you really want to follow along. She realizes that she doesn't agree with that statement. All of a sudden, she's glad that she went, and she was glad that she made those connections. And that's what I'm saying. There's like these little incremental pieces of growth that, because we've had to wait for the payoff for so long, is very, very enjoyable. I do like the slow burn. I like it in romance. I think when I have to wait a little bit more to get the payoff, it's more enjoyable. I'm sure there's some sort of psychology thing that backs that up. Same with this growth. I feel like because we've seen Tomoko struggle for so long, when she has those payoffs, when she's connecting with her friends over a snowy day when they're all stuck in the library studying, it's something that you definitely wouldn't have seen in volume 3 or 4 from Tomoko. And that growth, it just tastes so much sweeter when we've had to wait for it and suffer through a lot of really embarrassing moments with her to get to this point. If you're reading the series, let me know what you think about the series. I will say, one thing I do not care about in this series, or I care about less, and I feel like they could have dropped and I wouldn't have cared, is there's like some girls who are really into Tomoko's younger brother, and they sometimes pop up, and there's like a little bit of, people talking about Tomoko's younger brother and how they feel about him as a love interest. I don't really care about Tomoko's younger brother as a love interest. I mean, I like him as a character, but I don't care about that little subplot that's going on. I don't hate it, and I don't think it like super detracts from the story. I just personally, that one isn't capturing me, so I don't really care about it. If you care about it, I know I like glanced at some reviews and some people were talking about how they liked that little subplot, so other people could like it. It just wasn't for me. If you have any comments like that about the series thus far, I would love to hear it. If you have any manga series that I'm not reading or haven't appeared to have read and you think I would enjoy it, please recommend it. I love getting series recommendations because how am I going to know about cool things that I need to read if people don't tell me about it? And if you have anything you want to add, put it in the comments below. I love to hear your comments, I love to get suggestions, and I like to read them. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest